Thank you for tuning in to the Worldbuilder's Anvil, episode 188. Manipulating time before you run out of time.
Out of time? Oh, well, okay, everyone. It's a great episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time here on the Worldbuilder's Anvil.
No, Jeff, we're not out of time yet. We haven't started yet.
This is going to be really confusing, isn't it?
It's time travel.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the Worldbuilder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back, or maybe you've already been here. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And protecting the space-time continuum, I am Michael Miller.
You know, he's not Q, he is Z.
That's true. Always at the end, but surprisingly at the beginning as well, and all at the same time.
Yes, this will be the mind-warping episode of time travel.
As with all
we kind
of
of
our...
go into it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. As in all of our episodes, when you bring Jeffrey logic into stuff, it becomes sort of mind warping and sometimes a bit more confusing than it should be.
I was going to say, as with all of our greatest episodes, this one was my idea.
That's why they're all good. He actually made up all the episodes. Michael actually traveled back in time, planted the seed of the show in my mind because he knew he'd want to do it after I started.
It's the only way I can get credit.
That's why he's Z.
Z. So we were talking about stuff the other day, and it just I had shot Jeff some episode ideas, and time travel came to mind. Time travel is, I think, it's not just fantasy world builders love, but I think everybody loves a good time travel story. There's so many great philosophical things going on there. There's so many great clever ideas going on there, like what you can do to change things and what have you. And if you're thinking about playing around with a time travel story, we figured there's some things you should consider first. So Jeff has...
As a lot of our good episodes are for these things, instead of being a list, which Michael for some reason doesn't like, but I love
lists.
These are really the questions you should ask yourself. And are they all the questions? You'll have to find out when you're done, but then you can go back into the past and fix it.
It's true.
Okay.
So, know the rules of time travel. So, the first question we have here is what directions, as in what directions can you travel in? You travel forward in time, or back in time, or both?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think one of the classic shows, Quantum Leap, he could only, I believe, travel backwards was the rule of the series. And I don't tell me there are exceptions, because I know there are.
That's definitely not true.
I thought he could only travel back within the scope of his life.
No, he oh, wait. Which show are you saying? Quantum Leap? Did you
Quantum
say?
Leap.
Yeah, no, he jumped all over the place. He was...
Well, I know like later on they started breaking that rule, but the initial premise was he could travel back in time. And I know like he had Civil War episodes and stuff like that.
Well, the thing was each leap was into a different person. He was fixing something in their life. But even in the very opening credits, they talked about him hoping that the next leap would be the leap home. So there was definitely an aspect where he'd be leaping forward in time as well.
Well, because he's going through bodies.
Right.
Yeah. Well, no, he could move, but it was within the scope of his life.
Yeah.
Maybe it was his entire life.
That I can't confirm. I don't know if he was limited to only his own lifespan of time. I don't know.
They kept that for several seasons, and I know like there was a Civil War one, which led to questions like how could that possibly be? But and of course the character in the present of his life, which helped ground the present of the show to sometime in the distant future.
There was some fiction. I can't remember if it was something that I read or something that I watched. It's only vague in my mind, which makes me think it was something that I read, where they could only travel forward in time.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that seems weird to me.
That's actually kind of a common theme, and sometimes even where there's the ability to go in the past, there's like a restriction saying you can't ever do that. You can only legally travel forward, and which leads to the idea of the butterfly effect. And, you step on a butterfly, and then you're some guy is late coming home and gets mad, goes out to a bar, kills someone who's your great great grandmother.
There is a great movie called Deja Vu where they. No, never mind. Wait a minute, I think I've heard this before. Where the basic gist is they develop a technology that allows them to see back in time, but it's as though they have a window to a precise moment that is constantly cycling forward. So as time progresses forward in the present, the time that they are able to observe in the past is also cycling forward. So they can only see...
Is that like the same rate?
Yes. So they can only see 4 days ago, or like 4.5 days ago, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And they can only see what they are choosing to look at. So they record everything that they're looking at, but they can't go to... They can go anywhere in the moment, but they can't go back or forward. They can only be in what I'm going to use air quotes here, the past present, because it is a constantly cycling moment. So the basic gist of the movie is that there is a terrorist attack, and they immediately put this technology into play to try to figure out what happened. They immediately put it into play, so they're looking at 4 days ago. So they need to figure out clues based on the attack to find things going on 4 days ago to prevent the attack from happening.
And here's one of the interesting things I actually just thought of as you were describing that, and what we've been talking about. In a way, could you argue a prophecy thing, let's say Minority Report? Mm-hmm. It's a form of time travel in that same sense, where you can see forward to a point of time. Mm-hmm. And in this case, you can predict, someone who's going to become a murderer before they do, or see something happen in the future that, you maybe can't even control how you get there. Like in Minority Report, it was like traumatic criminal offenses. But it could be tied another way. Like maybe there's a certain time and you can move around and look, but it keeps moving at the same rate you're moving in time.
See, so I loved that movie. I loved Minority Report. My only problem with it was, if somebody is going to kill somebody, then your job should be just to prevent that and calm that person down and let them know. Not arrest them because they haven't committed the crime yet. Oh, yeah, but you're going to. Well, no, you intervened. So since you intervened, I didn't.
My argument would be it's the bigger story of Minority Report is the corruption around it. So it's like, was he ever going to be the guy who killed that person? Mm-hmm. Do you create its possibility by saying it's so, and then if you don't do it, would it have ever happened? You know what I'm saying? If they had never conceived it, could the events started falling into place which would cause it to happen?
Yeah.
Well, and so that's anything with Philip K. Dick I love.
Me too. Speaking of,
it really hurts the brain in a good way.
Speaking of Philip K. Dick and time travel, take a look at the movie Predestination. It didn't do very well, but I think it was... I
don't think I've even heard of that one.
Yeah, Ethan Hawke. The movie creates a time paradox, a really large one that's very hard to ignore, and I think that might be why the movie didn't do super well, because there's this whole thing with time, and this is going to be something that you're going to deal with. This is, I think, one of the main crux of time travel, and certainly if you're watching The Flash and you watch season 3 of The Flash, they dealt with this a lot, is if you go back in time and you change a thing and then you move forward in time, it could change things drastically. Mm-hmm.
But that's one version of how to look at it. Yep.
Well, right. So I feel like we're not even going to get to the second question because we could just go on and on about just the moving forward in time, back in time. I'll tell you what, here's what we should do. Let's go through the questions a little more and
we'll sort of come back. Yep.
Yeah, because I could spend a lot of time just here, and I don't want to miss all the questions because that's really what
each of these questions could possibly be show topics.
They really could. Okay, so the first question was, what direction is your story going to allow time travel to exist, either forward in time, back in time, or both? The second question is, do you travel into the future?
Now, this is an existential question, and this could mean the past as well. If you're traveling in time, are you really traveling in time, or are you always where you are in a linear time frame? So it's like, this is my next moment. It's 500 years in the past or 500 years in the future, but it's still my now. So sort of in that mind screwy way, when I travel to the future, does that become the present? And this will kind of lead to another question later on, But,
I think the question, I think what you're trying to point out here is the perspective which you choose to use as the delivery system of the story. To say, okay, well, we're now in 3625. We were just in 2017, but we're now in 3625. So is 3625 now the present, and you're going to stay there for a while and talk about it as though it's the present, or are you going to reference it
and the
as
reason
the future?
I think about this one is it's something that kind of came up a couple seasons ago in Doctor Who. To be honest, I haven't really watched the last couple seasons very well because I didn't think they were that well done. But they got into this thing where it's like, this is your past, but my future. So I can't tell you what's about to happen because even though it's happened and I know what's happened, I can't tell you because it's your future. And that would, in Doctor Who, corrupt your future.
Yeah, no. What was the movie with Hugh Jackman and Meg
Logan?
Ryan?
Oh,
no.
Meg Ryan,
It's actually a really cute romantic comedy time travel movie. I'll have to look it up, but there's a part in
it. Time travel romance movie.
No, it's really good, and there's a point in it where the guy who understands time travel and who creates this time travel thing that occurs, he's like, "No, that's your future," and she's like, "Well, that's the past, though. That's like the 1800s. That's the past." He's like, "Yes, it is the past." From the perspective of this being present, but it's your future. It's where you're going to go and then live out your future, which is a great, fun idea. I was watching the makings of Back to the Future today, all three, the makings of number 1, the makings of number 2, and the makings of number 3. And one of my favorite things in that movie is in the very beginning of the first movie where Marty says to Doc Brown, you obliterated Einstein, you disintegrated Einstein. He's like, I didn't disintegrate anything. And he's like, well, where the hell is he? And he goes, no, the question is, when the hell is he?
Yeah.
Which, I love that question. Well, when is
he? Yeah. No, that's a good one. And, but that's one of those questions where, once again, we could spend a whole episode on, because philosophically, there's a lot to the question of, it's like, especially if you have multiple characters moving back and forth in time, when is it your present, their past, and when it goes into what are the costs and risk of time travel? Because one of the common ones is like the butterfly effect, where you can screw up the past. Even a relatively minor thing can ripple out and cause massive changes. Or sometimes it has to be bigger, like they go back in time to try and kill someone's parent, or they go back to kill Adolf Hitler when he's a child, that kind of thing. Or, but other times you have the idea of time is a river and it's flowing. And you can do something. You can even throw a pretty big rock into a river, and it will cause a splash. But much beyond that, it course corrects because it's flowing in its path. So there's a couple different ways to look at it, but there's always cost and risks. Sometimes it's to the future from the present. Sometimes it's to the past, or sometimes it's to all of reality. If you create a bad paradox, you can destroy all of time and space, is a popular time travel kind of trope, I guess. But, so what are the costs and the risks? And a lot of that depends on, do you travel to the future? Even though you're in what's the future from when you were born, is it your present?
While we're talking about costs and risks, is it appropriate to add this in there? Are you asking about the cost as in what would actually be an energy cost of creating time travel? Okay.
It could be like the cost to do it, but it's also the higher level, like what is at risk. Because what's a good story without risk involved? You know, if you could go back, travel in time, and act as a person, and you couldn't affect the future, but what happened if you died? So you travel back to ancient Rome, and you're walking around, and Nero mugs and kills you in the street. Are you dead in the future? You know, maybe that's the risk. Maybe it's the risk that you step on that butterfly and blow up all of time and space. So, you know, so it's both the cost of performing the activity. Is it simple? And we get a little bit more into, you know, what does it take to time travel? You know, what allows you to time travel? And I forgot the word "you" in that question, but you know, what allows you to time travel? And once again, is there a cost to it? And going back to like the magic episodes, maybe it's big. Like maybe you've sold your soul for the ability to do it. Maybe you've accidentally lost yourself, like in Quantum Leap, because of experimenting with it. So, you know, what's the cost and what's the risk? Because really, in stories, when there are no cost or risks involved, how much fun? I mean, when was the last time you read a book that, at least at an emotional level, there was no risk or cost?
The paradox bit is something that we could spend a great deal of time on. But there's a couple of things that I really wanted to address here. One is an idea that I actually should really write a time travel story myself to explore. But I have the concept of what if there is only one timeline, right? And when you alter it, you don't. There's the whole idea of you've got a straight line, and then if you go back in time and you change something at a certain point, then the line deviates from what was a straight line to now a bent line, and that bent line represents the new timeline that you've created by adjusting actions in the past. Well, my idea is, what if it doesn't happen that way? What if you change things in back in time, but when you go forward, both things are still there. So, if I travel back in time, and then I travel forward in time, I did something to adjust my own life. And then I travel forward in time to the point at which I traveled in time. So there's the me that grew up and experienced life the way I did and then traveled back in time. And there's a me that experienced the change that I created. So when I travel forward in time, there's two versions of me, and also a third, which is the version of me that has now returned to that timeline. So every time you travel in time, you effectively multiply yourself.
Yeah, and maybe that's something I see. I always find that a cool kind of paradox where that's where you can't interact with the past yous, you know, because you know that puts everything at risk when you do that, you know, and these kind of things. Sometimes that branches out in bigger ways to where if you would travel back in time and change something major, you don't actually change the present that you were from. You've now created an alternate Earth, an alternate reality that has sprung up from the timeline and has grown out. So there's a whole different Earth and a different plane of existence that one major event changed from the world you were on. And, you know, that is the argument for why there are alternate Earths. And I don't know for sure, but maybe something like Sliders, if it would have played out, would have ended up being that kind of a story where it's really these alternate Earths were created because of people sliding around and changing things that have happened.
That was a great show for stories like that. What you just said, though, reminded me very much of two movies. One that I just recently watched, which is on HBO Go. It's called Frequently Asked Questions About Time Travel. And it's this fun little UK comedic sci-fi about time travel. It's actually very clever. And the movie The Arrival, which is about aliens coming to Earth, but there is a very, very cool time aspect of that movie that I'm sure a lot of people would not expect. I certainly didn't expect it. And then watching it, there's a time aspect to it that is very, very cool.
So it's like a first contact with a twist.
It is a first contact with a twist. So paradoxes, like what is going to create a paradox and how are you going to deal with paradoxes? Dealing with paradoxes in time travel stories tends to be one of the crux of the story. A lot of times there are stories where that's all they're dealing with is the paradox. You take a look at The Butterfly Effect, which is I loved that movie. A lot of people think it was stupid. I really enjoyed that movie.
I really enjoyed the first one.
And the first one, yeah. I don't know that I watched the second one. The second one was like, I don't think I saw the third.
It's an intellectually heady movie, and I think that's why a lot of people didn't like it. But it really explored the paradox angle really well.
Yeah, it did. I think another fun idea for time travel would also be having it all be having it work, because there's always a heavy cost to time travel, and things always turn out poorly. Like it's almost never good that the time travel occurred. It's always we went back and changed something and we came forward and now things are totally messed up and we have to change it again. Or
I think would be interesting in that crux is someone uses time travel to get rid of the woes of the earth and creates a utopian state, and then they travel back to it. And for those of you who don't know the utopian genre, because the dystopian genre is very popular right now, and it grew out of the utopian genre, which is not nearly as dark, because it's like these worlds are perfect. It's like there's just nothing wrong here when you first introduce yourself. But then there's always the problem in a utopia is there's always some cost.
There's always something that is messed up.
Maybe it's a very small group of people who have to suffer. There's some cost that is hidden and unseen from the rest of the world.
Logan's Run.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So our next question is there something that protects the timeline? Do you have Time Lords?
Time Lords. I mean, I think this is another common thing when time travel is heavy, especially in a series. If it's not at the beginning, it almost always shows up. Like pretty much, I think season 3 of The Flash is all dealing with a time paradox, and then the consequences and trying to then keep playing with time, try and get it right, and then over just keep making things maybe not horribly worse, but never the same. And then you start getting things that try to protect the space-time continuum.
Yeah, in that one you have the time wraiths, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that's what they're called in that one. I very much enjoy that show.
Well, anyone that's a fan of the DC
and I found
universe,
it interesting. The new Flash 52 movie's code name or possible actual name will be Flashpoint. Just saying.
That's cool. Well, the Flashpoint is now more like it's bigger than what that name implies. The comic books did the Flashpoint series. They made a really great Flashpoint movie. And now they've been dealing with Flashpoint in the television show. And while I love the television show, I'm a big fan.
But it's different.
It's very different. If you want to watch a fantastic like time travel and obviously superhero, and while it is a Flash movie, it's also a really good Batman tale. Is Flashpoint? They
did like an animated version.
Oh, yeah, you haven't seen it? You don't know what I'm talking about?
No, I
oh, my gosh. It is so good.
I have to go to CWC. They seem to have all of the animated DC stuff up there.
Well, how familiar are you with Flashpoint?
I never read the original miniseries.
The basic gist, and I'm not giving away a lot, this is going to be a really small spoiler. It's not a big spoiler. It's something you will learn very early in the movie if you're going to watch the movie Flashpoint.
Time changed?
He goes back in time. He changes something. I won't say what. He comes back to what is his present. And what he changed had gigantic ripples. And instead of Bruce's parents getting shot in the alley and him becoming Batman, Bruce gets shot in the alley and his father becomes Batman. And it is a very different Batman.
Actually, I did know that part about it, but yeah.
Gun-toting, ruthless Batman. It is.
You killed my baby. That's usually a different Batman.
It is fantastic. Right. It is really, really good.
And really, I mean, the word Flashpoint has become almost a a trope within the DC universe, talking about going back and changing something in time, which causes a pocket Earth or whatever you want to call it, but has these enormous changes. Now, one of the other things I like to think, along with, is there something to protect the timeline, is what allows you to travel through timeline? Because that's something that varies a lot. Is it an atomic powered chair? Is it, you can run really fast and warp space time? How do you do it?
In the movie Somewhere in Time, it was concentration and meditation. He had created a oneness with himself to discover how to move himself through time by will.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be scientific. It can be whatever. Just have something there so you know what needs to happen in the story for it to work.
That's actually. Have you ever seen Somewhere in Time?
No, but it reminded me of. I was thinking From Here to Eternity, because I used to love the old war movies, and it was the USS Enterprise. I think was the name of the ship. It was a modern U.S.
A battleship, not to be confused
not
with
a battleship, aircraft carrier. And, basically, gets sucked through some time vortex back to the Pacific on the eve of Pearl Harbor. It was a huge movie experience. I think it was back in the 80s. And I watched it, and it enthralled me. But it led to questions of what do you do? Because this one carrier probably had more firepower than the Japanese fleet did. So, I mean, it leads to very interesting questions. What do you do? Or what can you do if you travel in time? But now, getting through that, I have to get to another one of my big existential questions. And a lot of these are variations of themselves. But I think you have to revisit these questions because time travel is funky. And, I personally, I don't think I want to write a time travel story just because I'm an overthinker. If you haven't listened to the show, you might not know that. If this is your first time, you're just maybe starting to get the idea. But time travel stories are something that you can overthink so much that I would be trapped in my own mind if I tried. So I think I'll avoid them, at least for now. But is there a present at all? If people can travel through time and there are more people, is this idea of what is a present date and time real? Is there a linear timeline at all? Or maybe is that just a way we perceive life and someone stops seeing the world in the same way and appears to time travel, but is not. He just is broken through that mold. So that's just something that hit me when I was writing this out, is there any present date and time at all? Is it all just an illusion? Is it something we create in ourselves? I think existential questions are something that you can easily explore in time travel stuff, and often are, I think, the overriding story thoughts in a lot of time travel. At least the non-time cop stuff. Now. And
going back here, you're like, what allows time travel? Like if there's a given method or device, at that point would be a good time to ask yourself, what is the experience like? Like, what is it like to move through time? The guys at Back to the Future decided that there was an instantaneous shift from one present to another present. And it was just a flash of light and poof, you're there. So when Marty went back to 1955, he was immediately in a cornfield immediately. When he traveled back in time to the Old West, he was immediately out in the desert. So that was the whole thing about it, is that the change was instantaneous. But in other time travel movies, you see them flying through wormholes, and there's all this light and these weird effects, and it's like, oh, they experience this.
Or they can see things that are happening in time that are flashing around them, maybe.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of Stargate here, not because that wasn't a time travel show, but from the idea of early on in the series and in the movie, when people went through, like they would come out really cold, and like if you weren't in like special forces kind of shape, you would probably just kind of collapse over, because your body is discombobulated, probably because we do have an internal clock in us, and maybe it does get screwed up.
in Deja Vu, they addressed that exact thing.
You already covered this point.
No. It's... Oh, I remember. Oh, never mind. You were there a moment ago. No, you're about to go there. In Deja Vu, they talked about the extraordinary quantity of energy that it takes to move a given thing through time. And they... I won't, without spoiling it, I won't say exactly what they do. But actually, to share the thing, I'm going to have to spoil it. They send a person back in time.
Spoiler.
So they send a person back in time, but they were talking about, because of all that energy and all the different things that are going on, your body has electrochemical things going on in it, and it would probably kill you. Mm-hmm. So they sent him back in time into an emergency room and wrote on his chest, "Revive me." So he lands in an emergency room and he's like seizing, and they start working on him. They're like all the lights go out, and then he appears, and they're like, "Where the hell did this guy come from?" And they're like, "Doctor, get on him!" And they save him, and then he's able to continue his adventure.
So I guess you definitely won't travel too far back in time. Demon.
So what is that experience like? Think about that.
And this is one, that I think about because of Jeffrey's strangeness in his mind is, and probably this is Star Wars' fault too, is what does technology look like when you travel back and forth in time? In our very limited scope as humans, we think of, you have a Stone Age, you have an Iron Age, you build up, and technology is improving at a linear movement forward in time. But if I time travel 1 million years, maybe it's not true. Maybe something happened. All of humanity died out. Maybe it's the Planet of the Apes. But if I time travel back really far, maybe there was something during Pangea. This whole big, what was that old silly dinosaur thing where the dinosaurs were like the Flintstones? I don't even remember the name of it. But, maybe they had their own civilization and it's lost because of, tectonic plate movements and getting buried so deeply in time we don't know about it. So maybe if you go back far enough, you're in Star Wars, and if you go ahead far enough, you're in a Brave New World kind of thing where it's technology like with pilgrims.
Or maybe you travel back in time and something you do affects the development of technology, and the time traveling machine never gets built, so it immediately vanishes and you're stuck in the past.
Or you disappear into time and space because you changed something in the past, so before you can get there to change it, you...
I think we're back on the paradox question.
Oh, we're in a paradox again? Great. Okay. Universe, boom!
Poof. Yeah, I think it seems like it's kind of just one of those universal ideas. Like the concept of doing a time travel story is something that so many people gravitate towards because we have so many of them. Just while we were sitting here, I just off the top of my head wrote a few down. I wrote down the frequently asked questions about time travel, Arrival, Final Countdown, From Here to Eternity, Somewhere in Time, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Back to the Future, Cade and Leopold. You have written down here The Butterfly Effect, Doctor Who, Lightning by Dean Koontz, and we
talked about Terminator. We talked about 12 Monkeys.
Yeah, 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys.
The Time Machine. H.G. Wells.
Primer is a brilliant time travel movie.
According to you. I've not seen it, so I can't make fun of it.
It's really good.
But
you'd like it. It's right up your world, right up your alley. You'd like it.
And another one, and we talk about, which is funny because we live in Central Connecticut, and the Mark Twain House is a museum here, and I went there, and they were talking about how at least the argument from the people who work at the museum, which might be slightly biased, argue that King Arthur or the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court was the birth of the modern fantasy genre, sword, sorcery. But Michael and I were talking about too, and it's another really old version of time travel because he traveled back from modern times, the times of Mark Twain, back to this really old time of King Arthur and his court. Yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that one.
Yeah, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that one. All right, I'm trying to
And
think.
there are 10 million more we've not mentioned, and we apologize.
I'm trying to think quickly.
Time Cop. I mentioned that one.
Oh,
who doesn't want to forget Time Cop? Which is a real fun. I enjoyed the first one.
It was a comic book movie.
That was a comic book? I did not realize.
I didn't know that either until just recently. I had found something.
That must have been like an independent comic book.
I guess. I had never heard of it as a comic book, but I was reading something about it was something on Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, and they were saying how that was a comic book movie, and I was like, I didn't know that.
Did not know that. But yeah, it crosses genres, so it's like big time action movies, really rip your mind apart and then smash on them. And you can even look at other things too, like maybe Man in High Castle has something to do with time travel. I don't know.
Is that an alternate? Is that just an alternate reality, or is it time travel?
Maybe. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen any of it.
I don't want to say anything more.
Okay, no, because it's something that it's on my list. It's not a high priority because I've got so much other things going on right now.
It is exceptionally well done. It's kind of harsh because of the subject matter, obviously, with Nazis and Imperial Japan in charge of the world.
Yeah.
But as you watch it, I don't know what's going on, which makes it. They took a short story of Philip Dick, and they've done a good job turning it into a series longer than it.
Yeah. So. Time travel. Yeah. And also, think about why you want to time travel. Like, why you want to have that as a part of the story or the story. Like, why?
And like I said, I would have actually kind of stay away from this if you're a novice story writer. If you want to screw around and try and pop one out, do. But I wouldn't, plot out your first novel. Unless you just want it to be like a fun action thing, I don't think it matters so much. But if that's what would trap me, is I get so intrigued with the idea, I would be trapped there forever. So maybe that's just a personal flaw. So I'm wrong.
I'm gonna go the opposite way, since we just spent an entire episode telling you what you can do and use to make the story. I'm gonna say go for it.
So what's the Worldbuilder's task for today?
Let's have it be write a short story including time travel in your world. Blow up your world for bonus points.
Yes.
You can take your time travel story and make it an apocalyptic story, and you can go back to our old Apocalypse series to talk about that. And there's certainly plenty. Terminator is both time travel and apocalyptic.
Yes.
So,
or maybe not.
For the real world task, why don't you go build a DeLorean time machine?
No. The lawyers just texted me. Make it a Chevy Vega. That's better.
Wait, can't have it be the...
No.
But if you're going to build a time machine out of a car, you might as well do it in style.
No. We can't do that one. I'm getting text. I've got 13 texts from the lawyer since you said that statement. So hopefully I'll remember to cut that out this episode.
Chevy Vega, everyone. Chevy Vega.
Build a Chevy Vega time machine for bonus points, of course.
Oh, and if you want to get any of those movies that we just mentioned, then run over to Amazon, but do it through our portal. Go through www.garduel.com/Amazon for all of your Amazon needs, including all of the time travel fiction that you now have to do research on.
And I will try and throw up some of the links, if not all of them. I'll probably miss some. There were so many references in here in the show notes. So if you go to the show notes for this episode at garduel.com, you'll see some direct links to like Back to the Future or Lightning and some of the other ones that we've talked about. Probably not all of them because I'll get bored doing it because there were so many in this episode. But the safer way is just go to garduel.com/Amazon.
And you could also just put them on a list. So even if you don't include an Amazon link, they could at least know what was mentioned.
Mm-hmm. But then I might as well do the link.
So do the link.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. And if you want some more bonus discussion or you want to hurt my easily scarred mind, go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft.
And come talk to us about time travel, because I think this is going to create some fun threads.
Thank you so much for listening to the Worldbuilder's Anvil. We would love it if you would share the Worldbuilder's Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.